I feel so daunted about committing to this. I've been putting this off for months now, so I'll throw caution to the wind and pen a modest piece about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. This will not be the best piece ever written on Psycho, so do calm down. I'll say with confidence that I believe Psycho to contain the finest music ever composed for film, certainly in the classical composition category. Bernard Herrmann was just the greatest, and his music here is beyond iconic. No other classical score composed for film is as recognizable as Psycho's, except for maybe a couple of John Williams numbers. Even outside of that classical category, I do believe it is the most interesting music ever composed for film, both in regard to its affect in isolation and its relevance over the actual film's execution. The release of Psycho might be considered an opening of the floodgates, and the masses who paid to see it as the flood itself. Suddenly, Hollywood realized how much profit they could obtain from scandalous pictures without the worrying watchdog of perceived public morality. If any film could have been censored to prevent the permissiveness of the new Hollywood epoch, then it might plausibly be 1960s Psycho. Remember, everything about this film was considered scandalous. The toilet flushing was controversial, for goodness sake. This major Hollywood production from 1960 begins with the explicit implication of casual premarital, in his case, extramarital, sex on her lunch break. Our leading lady introduces herself in lingerie and even more controversially announces that she has a sex drive. Obviously, we all know that the apex of the scandal was the shower scene itself. Nudity, violence, suffering. Imagine if it had just been one of the three, but all of them? What audacity. In viewing Psycho again for this write-up, I contemplated as to how even depicting the upper quarter of Janet Leigh, any woman, enjoying the private heaven of a shower, partially erotic, taking pleasure in nudity, probably not common in any other media released that year. As I say, if there was no subsequent iconic murder, the Hitchcock shower scene would still be considered groundbreaking for that one particular facet alone. Let's discuss my favourite edit in film history. As we first cut to Marion after the opening of the shower curtains, there is a subsequent edit, a closer-up shot of her face, reacting, screaming. This articulate communication of the human nervous system through film editing at least partly encapsulates why I obsess over this medium. The following edit, an extreme close-up of Marion screaming more, emphasizes her mortal terror. The shower scene is ruthless, aggressive, angry, malignant, nasty, sadistic, sociopathic. In the context of 1960, this is like shamelessly showing off your carefully executed murder. No one had dared to consider simulating a murder in film, or any other medium, especially not one so involving, so empowering of imagination, so experiential as memory and experience, so articulate at depicting, communicating, translating, conjuring, replicating the subjective sensory phenomena of a simulated human consciousness. To do something like this using the film medium at this time might have been considered utterly irresponsible. Michael Powell learned this that same year. Hitchcock was sadistically bragging about how well he could simulate such a traumatic, undesirable experience, one of the ugliest depictions of reality conceivable. Someone being murdered whilst they take a shower. That is completely ruthless. Everyone who wants to direct a film nowadays cannot wait to stage a murder. I know I did, and have actually, and we all have Alfred Hitchcock to thank for this. For only Hitchcock, with his power and control, could have the imagination and the subsequent audacity, the capacity, to construct this cinematic Pandora's box. Now, here's a question I felt that was worth asking. Is this film better for having to employ some censorship? Well, that scene in particular, I mean. Well, no and yes. It was vital that Psycho remain within the old Hollywood genome for it to feel truly effective, in universe and stylistically believable, realistic within this film's established aesthetic. Remember, Hitchcock wanted to depict the shower sequence as though this was the first murder in Hollywood history, and that had to be emphasized, not the fact that it could have potentially featured the first bare breasts in American mainstream films since the early 30s. Let's say we lived in a timeline in which the Psycho shower scene featured both its recognizable violence and also some revolutionary, groundbreaking nudity. It would be too much pure shock. Let me explain. It would not be as effective because an affective trick is more interesting than just simulating snuff. Style is better than no style, and insofar as censorship demanded style, it can be given this credit at least. The same thing could be said of any other production's budgetary restrictions or technological limitations historically. Whilst all of these things are generally undesirable, they can be useful for enriching one's filmmaking imagination at the best of times, leading to the conjuring, the illusion, as opposed to the outright. There's a reason, if you really wanted to watch horrific snuff films, and if you wanted to watch a real horror film, you'd watch footage of some atrocities committed around the world. You don't. You're more impressed. You're more explicitly terrified and in admiration of the crafting of the illusion. But believe it or not, despite my mad rambling, and it was mad, frankly, the shower scene is not my favourite sequence in Psycho. Probably my second favourite. Rather, my favourite sequence comes right afterward. It's when Norman disposes of Marion's body. Without dialogue, without much intrusive musical score, Norman places her corpse within the trunk of her car, drives it down to a nearby swamp, pushes it in, and looks around in paranoia that his actions might be witnessed. First in, best dressed. Possibly the first scene of its kind in mainstream cinema history, or at least the first for a very long time. Think about it. Witnessing a murderer, a serial murderer as we later discover, disposing of their victims' remains. Had this been realised earlier in a film? I am totally unsure. Michael Powell's Peeping Tom was released that same year, I will mention this. As I said, first in, best dressed. How could a subsequently inspired sequence attain that initial power of the scene which dared to depict the murderer hiding the evidence of their prey? It is ferociously chilling. I feel as though I will close my thoughts on Psycho here, because to waffle on any further would imply that I am trying to jam my foot into the door of Psycho-inspired film analyses, which I am not. I'm just sliding this under its door and running away instead. Have a beautiful day. I just decided I would let screen caps of the shower scene and the subsequent removal of Marion's body sequence. I decided I would let these play out over the remainder of the video because they're just too good. Anyway, as I said earlier, have a beautiful day.